afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the session, Simple Windows Deployment for Schools. My name's Craig Ashley. I'm a product manager on the Windows team, clearly not from Australia. I'm from Redmond, Washington. My role is to focus on the products that are better for education, so that make education better in schools. And so what we'll do over the course of this probably 75 minutes here is I want to take you through a new school deployment workflow. And as some of you may know, when we submit sessions, we have to do it months in advance. And you'll notice that this is a 300-level session. 4 or 5 months ago, when we were going through the normal workflows that you go through in schools to get Windows deployed, the general thinking was we'd have a pretty deep technical session today. I really think, and the goal of what we were trying to do here with this workflow was to make it a simpler process to get Windows running in schools, because we know that it's the teaching portion, the learning on the back end, that's the important part. So, you know, there's 300 level. There's some stuff we won't cover that might get there, but the majority of this process flow, you can get a school up and running or a class up and running in about 60 minutes from beginning to end in this workflow. And so what we're going to cover here is all of the things up on this slide. We're going to start with setting up Office 365. We'll talk about Intune for Education. And I just want to pause just briefly. Has anybody heard of Intune for Education? Okay, so a few hands up here. A few weeks ago were the first announcements of it. And again, when I submitted the session, I couldn't put Intune for Education in the session title. So we were a little cryptic in that. But we'll do that. We'll show SDS, which is School Data Sync, and ways to get data into this system. We'll talk about the Windows Store, set up School PC app, some new stuff coming there, and then we'll show a couple of the things on the end, which is logging into one of these devices. What does it look like, both from a student perspective and then also from an administrator perspective, because we've changed some things on the administrative side to make it better as we provision devices. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just on the upfront piece. When we launched the anniversary update and a little before that, Satya Nadella has made huge changes kind of across Microsoft, and he has a huge focus on education, both from a personal perspective and also from trips he has made down to Africa and other locations. And so he has challenged us across Microsoft as an organization, across business groups, to focus on the learning outcome piece. That's not the focus of this session. This is getting to the point where the classroom can be focused on better learning outcomes, and the teachers can focus on those things. But we've seen quite a few changes. If we look at kind of this right-hand side here, you see a bunch of the things that we hear when we talk to schools that teachers are looking for, and we want the technology to kind of get out of the way and let them get to what matters for them. And so there's 3 areas here that we'll cover over the course of this. I have a session tomorrow that goes more into the end user scenarios tomorrow morning, which is what can we do from a usability or a teacher perspective in the classroom. But some of that's down here in this section. Really what we're going to focus on here is we're going to focus on getting devices up and running. And I brought an example of one of the newer devices we'll talk about a little bit later. But hopefully we'll start seeing more and more of these coming through, sub $300 devices. This one happens to be touch and pin enabled as well as a clamshell. It's an Acer device. So I'll have this up here afterwards if anyone just wants to take a quick look at it. But again, the goal is to get this running very quickly in schools. And so let's talk about the first portion of this, which is setting up the Office 365. There's obviously various levels of Office that can be purchased in schools. And at the very basic level is Office 365 Education. You can go and sign up as a school, for Office 365 Education for free, and that gives you all of the web properties of Office 365 Education. And so the first step in this process is, if we wanted to just set up a single school or a single classroom, is we would go out and we would sign up for that. And then we'd get access to a couple of these other pieces. So let me switch here and show you what that workflow looks like. It is the first piece here for signing up for Office 365. A bunch of stuff open here. You can go to the Office 365 Education page today and you can click on this workflow. you can select if you're an administrator and you want to sign up for this. And simply what you would do is you would go through the process here of clicking through here, and I'm just going to simply fill in my information. And I'm going to click fictitious size here and click next. Oh, where am I located? I'll put in the US for myself, not Australia. Now the next piece here, and this one is what I'm not going to do, is that next one. This one is going to be the place where I would then finally sign up for it, and it would create my account, and it would give me a user ID. And so the tenant I've already set up for this already has this process flow, but what I simply do is I put my name in. I can put in a fictitious name here, or for your school, if you have a school name, you can put it in there. My suspicion is some of you or many of you may already have Office 365 and may have access to the admin portal, which we'll show in just a minute here. And you can go in and do kind of the next steps here if you don't have to sign up for it on your own. But once you've gone through this, then you receive access to the Office 365 portal. And that one is right here. And so once you've signed into that, you have access to the online piece. And then you will have the admin button right there. And when I click on that, I go to the admin office portal. Has anybody used the Office admin portal? Who's in here? So, all right, so everybody has seen this in here. My next step is for myself as an admin user is to simply go into the Users tab and assign myself a license here. At this point then, that Office 365 setup piece is done. You may have gone through a process of assigning licenses in the past. We're going to show a different way to use that using School Data Sync. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull in information from your school information systems and assign licenses to teachers and students as part of that workflow. So again, that first step in the process here, if you haven't already done that, is to simply sign up for the Office 365 component. The next piece here is the Intune for Education. All of this is new workflows. We've talked to a whole bunch of schools, and they've told us that they would like a specific for education workflow in Intune. And you'll see what we've done to simplify this as we move forward. But I'm going to demo this process here. But what this is going to take us through is once we have that Office 365 tenant set up there, and I have users ready to go, I have purchased Intune for Education, and I have it ready to get set up. I'm going to step you through this process flow here of what we're calling a very light touch or a zero-touch Windows deployment. So I'm not going to talk about imaging devices and those types of things. In this workflow, we're going to suggest with the modern IT for schools not to do that, or you don't have to do it. A couple reasons you would do it: if you want a different edition of Windows on that device. If you don't want Pro or what came on it, if you want Education or Enterprise, then you would certainly want to do an upgrade or image on there at that point. But the general idea here is once the Intune piece is set up, it's going to manage on an ongoing basis a variety of things. It's going to manage applications that you're pushing to your devices. It's going to manage the policies on those devices. And the nice thing as we move forward is it's going to manage not just a device as Intune has done in the past, but it'll manage multiple users on a single device. And so this is new stuff. This has been in Windows itself for about a release cycle, but Intune hasn't supported the ability to manage multiple users on a single device. In education, the great thing about that is we're not all one-to-one deployments like in business. So we have shared devices, we have shared carts, and so Intune can manage the users and the policies on that as we move forward here. And we'll show just a little bit of how that works in just a minute. Once we've set up the Intune piece, which we're going to demo in just a sec, there's a new workflow for getting the device itself provisioned. So having this device that I've bought and ready to go. And there's two ways to do this. One way is going through that manual workflow, which is the out-of-box experience. Anytime you open up a new Windows device, you land on the language page, and then you do 7, 8, 9, 10 click-throughs to get that device ready to go. What we'll show you here is this more automated workflow, which uses a provisioning package on a USB drive to apply a whole bunch of policies and to enroll the device in both Azure, Active Directory, and mobile device management. So there's a couple ways to do it. For this workflow, we want to go down this way. We feel it's the fastest, simplest way to simply insert the USB drive, have the policies apply. When it reboots, any AAD user can log into this device. And then, of course, there's the managing over time. So pushing applications, and we'll show how we can push web apps to devices per user. Modern Windows applications from the Windows Store and the Business Store automatically sync into Intune for Education as well, and push those to devices and users. Now, what you'll see here is, and I showed it on the screen, but we'll show it live. The middle portion here is really the interesting one. Intune has a lot of things and a lot of policies that can be managed. The Intune for Education console has about 150 of those. And they're simple radio buttons, more or less. You turn on a policy or you turn off a policy. So there's a much more limited level or suggestion of things that we would suggest to manage in this modern school deployment. Behind the scenes, Intune is still there. So if you're managing a couple different sets of devices, for example, if you're managing student devices and you want to manage those with Intune for Education because it's this limited set of policies you want to manage, that's absolutely fine. You can flip over to the Intune console, which some of you may already be familiar with, and you have all of the other policies there to manage. If you write a policy or you do something in Intune, it carries over into the other one as well. So there's Intune, the infrastructure on the backside, and these are just two different user interfaces. Big Intune, which is everything, and Intune for Education, which has a specific, simpler to use workflow for getting devices ready to go in schools. Now, a part of this process, or an integral part of the process we'll show, is school data sync. Many schools that we've talked to have your student or your teacher data sitting in school information systems. And what school data sync does is it syncs up that information into Intune to be manageable. And there's a couple ways you can do it. We'll show a simpler way, which is a CVS file. Most SIS systems allow you to download those files and use those. And then there's a few different SIS systems that we integrate with right off the bat, and there's some links here showing that. Now, before we get to that part of the demo, typically when we talk to schools and we talk about some of these easy workflows and we talk about not imaging devices and a bunch of other things, everybody thinks it's great, and then on the way out, someone always tugs on my shirt and says, "Hey, Craig, can I still reimage those devices? Can I still manage via System Center?" And absolutely. We're not changing anything as we move forward, but on the left-hand side here, we're simplifying that process of managing a set of devices, if it's student devices. The rest of everything that we know and love and we've been doing, may not want to do, may want to continue to do, is still there. So System Center or Big Intune, any of that's still good for the sets of devices that you want to be managing those things for. But we also have this simpler way to get the devices up and running utilizing the cloud-first model. So let me switch over to Intune for Education and show you pretty easily and fast how it is to get Intune set up and get some devices running here. And before I do that, I just wanted to show the difference here. If you haven't seen Intune, Big Intune, regular Intune, or haven't used it, when you would log in, this would be your start page there. And so there's obviously a lot of things going on. I only have a couple devices which are enrolled in this tenant here. But if we're looking for simple in what some schools have been asking us for, this isn't quite as simple as what we'll see with the Intune for Education piece. And so right off the bat then you can see, as we switch from the other Intune interface to this one, it's a much straightforward, simpler looking interface. And what we've strived for here on the simple side is an express configuration, and you can see that there. This tenant already has some things in there, and I'm going to show you how we got it in there in just a second. But if I wanted to buy 20 devices and set up a STEM lab to do something in the library, and I didn't have any other infrastructure to do it, Express Setup, Express Configurator would be the way to do that. And I would simply just click on it here. And as long as the internet's nice for all of these demos, these are really connected back up to our tenant across the internet here. And you come to this, and it's telling you these are the steps you're going to go through to set this Intune for Education tenant up. The first one is to get school information. And so I simply just would click the Get Started button there. And you'll notice that I have data already pulled into this. I pulled this data in from School Data Sync. And School Data Sync is right here. It can be accessed from the O365 portal. It's in a preview, or it's actually available now to do some of this. But as I go in through here, you'll see that the tenant I've already set up is this BET tenant. My organization here, if I want to click on it, I have a couple schools set up in here as well. And sometimes we just have to ask ourselves to work through this again here. All right. Let's see if we can get another tab to open with it here. All right, so my organization page doesn't want to show right now. So let's look at the steps for adding a profile in there and setting that organization up. And I simply just click on the add profile there. And you'll notice what comes up here are a few things. And this will allow us to get the information in there. I would create a name for the profile. So in this case, I created a couple different ones. If we could get to the profile page and showed you it's 2 different schools. And then typically what we do here is we use the CSV files for the pulling the data here. And let's just call this test school. Now as I pull this down, there are a couple that are available in here, and one roster is also supported now. There are a couple sys systems, if you use any of those, or one roster that you can link this to, and it will continuously update the data. If it's not one of those, you can still pull these CSV files and pull that information in here. And so I'll just click the CSV file there. And so right now, the sync existing users, if I was going to simply update with my existing users that are in there, I would use that one. But I want to create a new file and then click Next. And so this is my tenant information, which is synced in here through Intune. I'm not going to change anything else here, but you notice there are some options there of things that I can do. This is where we can assign license as part of SDS there. So I can assign the device to be managed by Intune for Education, which is right here. I can assign Microsoft Classroom licenses. So Microsoft Classroom is a way for teachers to manage assignments. And I can do a couple other things here. So we'll click Next. I'm not going to change any of these policies. These are the policies that I would want to sync from what I'm pulling in from SIS. So if my sys system has these properties that pull off, I would simply select these ones that I want it to sync into Intune for Education here. And then finally, this is just, I'm not going to submit it. This is just the check-in page to see if everything had happened correctly here. So I'm going to exit that setup piece. Now the files themselves, what do these look like? So in essence, when you have these CSV files, you just have a variety of them here. And each of these link to one of those properties that's in there. Yes, question?
Is this likely to be localized for non-US terminology? Because Australia doesn't have further section, but all our else does. So this is terminology is not exactly.
Oh, from the SDS side?
Yeah.
That's a great question I would have to follow up on. So the question was, are the SDS terms going to be localized for specific areas? They'll be localized in terms of language. Now the colloquial pieces of those, well, I'll have to check and see. I don't know the answer to that to see if it will be. Good question. So I'm just going to open one of these up here and show you what's in there. Again, it's just a CVS file, and it pulls through data from the sys system and pulls it in here. These are just dummy files that we've created and have placed up on a specific location. If you're testing SDS and you want some files, you can get to them off that SDS page. So we have these files that are up there. It's a zip file you can download to test this if you want to try and see how it works with your systems without using your specific data. And so since I've already synced that in there, we'll just click next here. Now the next piece here is that information has done a variety of things. It's set up all users, teachers, students. The two schools that I set up are shown here that have synced over from the SDS side as well. So I can select a specific group. I'm just going to select all devices. This is the group that I'm going to assign the policies for as I walk through here. And so the next few steps will do that. If I wanted to set up a variety of groups, I could simply go through this Express configurator 3, 4, 5 times and create policies specific to those groups and apply those as we go through here. So I've selected all devices. Now the next page here is where we can sync applications that we want to provide. Some of these are already set up. Some of these are popular web apps. Some of, like right down here, the Windows Store apps are apps that I've already purchased or sitting in my Windows Store for Business. The Windows Store for Business is a portal that you can log into and purchase apps from the Windows Store. And I'll show it in just a minute. It is called Windows Store for Business, but when you are in education, when you're a school, university, it shows educational content first, and you'll see what that looks like there. But Intune for Education automatically syncs those apps in here, and at this point, for all those devices that I selected, I would simply go through here and I can check these, like Excel, and any of these other in here that I want to, say Duolingo. And then as I go through, when I click next, those are the apps that will get provisioned to that device when the user logs into it. Now here, this is the settings page. And as you notice, there's some very basic settings here. As part of the Express setup, we have a basic set of settings which we would suggest to be applied. And you see those on here as we go through here. Not configured or block. It's simply a radio button. You select which one back and forth. If I don't change anything here, it's just going to apply that basic set of policies, and that is what will get applied to those devices. But for example, camera, I could switch it to block the camera if we don't want the camera on the device to be used for a specific set of devices or for a specific set of users. And then you can see there are some other basic settings as we go further down here too, such as some device update settings and a couple other areas that we can change here. I click next. This is just the summary page. So this is showing the apps that I selected for the group all devices. The settings to apply, I didn't change any, so it's not showing any here. If I'd have changed them, it would show them there as well under the custom configuration tab. Now from here, I would simply click the Finish button, and I'm not going to apply those policies to this tenant at this point. But those policies would be out and ready to go. My next step would be to get the devices and get them ready and provisioned. And so in just a second, I'll show that. But what I wanted to show you here really quickly was I can expand the left-hand side of this, and I can get to my groups, my users, and my apps specifically. So from here, I can do other settings. I can change a variety of other things and get to different locations. But for example, if I click on groups, I'll see my groups come up in just a second here, my users, my devices, and a variety of other ones. And so, for example, I can select the apps here, and I can go in and I can modify what apps are on those devices. And I can provision and change and tweak those policies from here without going through the Express setup again. So once the devices are set up, these are the locations where I can go back in, and I can change just a single policy on a device. If I wanted to turn the camera back on, I could do that specifically as well. One more notch down here is the apps one. So if I click on that, this is the place where I can add more apps to the capability to push through. And so you'll notice there's a couple of interesting things here. There's web apps. So if you have specific web apps that you push to users right here, you can create a new one and push it, or the standard kind of Windows apps from the Windows Store here. But adding a web app is pretty straightforward. You would simply click on New App. You could put the name in there, the URL, the name you wanted to name the app, and then if there's a specific icon that you wanted to have as part of that as well. And that's easy to push that web app to that group of users or devices that are part of this process. The last thing, and we'll come back to this, is the Take a Test. And so we'll talk about Take a Test, and I'll show you how to set that up in a minute. This was a capability to provide high-stakes lockdown for testing. on a broad basis. So we'll come back to that one in just a second. But again, so what have we done so far here? We set up Office 365 Education. Intune is now ready to go. Policies are set for that classroom set of devices that I want to have going. And it's been about 25 minutes chatting and showing slides. So the goal, again, was in a very short period of time, now we're ready to get devices provisioned and ready to go for students here. So now let's talk about what's the flow for setting up those devices. This was the slide that I showed just briefly. We talked about that out-of-box experience and then utilizing the provisioning package workflows. And the provisioning package workflow is what I would like to center on here. With the anniversary update, we created a new app called the Set Up School PCs app. And the focus was to create a set of policies and apply them via a USB drive. It creates a provisioning package. And the provisioning package has some basic information so that I don't have to do all of those steps in that out-of-box experience process. And with Creators Update, which is coming out, we've added a bunch more policies and easier way to do some things as we do this. So when this policy is applied here, Set Up School PCs is doing a couple other things as well. And this is what it's doing behind the scenes. These are some of the things that we've heard on, specifically on some of these lower spec devices, like 432 or 464 devices, that we need to help manage on an ongoing basis. So it's doing a few things. The first thing it's doing is it's speeding up first-time login. So if you're using Azure Active Directory join, Office 365 logins on one of these low-spec devices, the target time for that is about 20 to 30 seconds for first-time login. Now what that's doing is it's pulling preferences from Azure and everything down to that device, provisioning policies. We did that by letting the app do a variety of things, such as installing apps that don't need to be there and some other things. Down here, what it's doing is it's improving the performance on that device over time. So if you have a shared cart and you have 20 or 30 or 40 people who are going to log in that device over the course of a year, those profiles build up a lot of data on that device. What this is doing is it's working, the account management piece is kind of working like in accounting terms, first in, first out. What it does is it removes profiles over time and keeps it running. So if profile 5 is running into resource contention, it wiped profile 1. So it keeps those logins going and keeps it working well and not bogging down over time. So let me switch over here and show you what the Set Up School PCs app looks like. Yes?
Any chance we can get a hold of those scripts for, I'm a school that runs SCCM and the biggest side of it. Any chance we can get hold of those scripts to just punch out via the other tool?
The provisioning package?
Well, the shared PC stuff with regards to cycling profiles and uninstalling rubbish and blocking Microsoft.
Yeah, so with Creators Update, the majority of the shared PC CSPs will have WMI bridges. So you'll be able to do that on Creators Update. So it will take a lot of this stuff that's happening to make these processes work better are happening under the covers in Windows. So on an anniversary update or before, a lot of those things may not work because some of the policies aren't in the client. But once we get to Creators Update, and in the Insiders builds, most of those are in there. If you have access to those now, you can test some of those things. The provisioning packages themselves, what Set Up School PCs creates, or the Windows Configuration Designer creates, the provisioning packages, will be scriptable as well once we get to Creators Update. And the details on that will get posted. So you'll be able to apply the provisioning package through that process to help you as well. So you can create a package and then apply it with those policies. So right now, the app that's in the Windows Store today for Set Up School PCs is somewhat limited in what it does. The app that will be in the Windows Store when we get to Creators Update, pull through it here, is this one. It looks very similar. But again, the goal is to create this USB with a provisioning package on it to apply policies through that out-of-box experience to get the device ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to walk you through what this looks like. This is all new if you've used Set Up School PCs before. But the first step is to log in with your Office 365 account. So you as an admin would log in with that. What that's doing is it is allowing this app to look out to your AAD account into Intune, and it's looking for some specific information. It's looking for groups, carts, devices, those types of things that are available here. I'm going to skip that step because I have a little bit of a mock-up in this app. The next step is simply to select Wi-Fi. Now the suggestion here is to, we'll get that one. The suggestion here for this one is to be on your Wi-Fi network as well. So when you're provisioning this or creating this provisioning package, to be on your network for it. Your Wi-Fi would show up here. You could add the password, and it would be ready to go here. And this is the joy of pre-release code here. So we'll skip to the next one. That next step there, which it should have done when I click next, if I'm logged into my admin account in that first step, it will look in my tenant for groups. So for example, if I want to set up this USB stick for a science lab or a cart, then I'm going to have this drop-down box which shows here. And when I click on the drop-down box, you'll see here there's just some mock-up ones for this one. But I could apply these policies on this USB, this provisioning package, only for devices that I want to be on cart 1 or classroom 1 or whatever group I have established in AAD. That wouldn't be there if I hadn't logged in at this point. It would just apply some basic policies. This is a pretty straightforward one here. This is allow guests. So if you want to allow someone to log into that device without a login or password, you would click yes here, and it would put that policy on the device for anyone to be able to log in. So if you have some younger age students and they don't use passwords, it could be accomplished through here as well. Take a test could also be set up here. And again, I mentioned we talk about that. It's a high-stakes assessment. If you have a URL from a testing company, you would simply input it in here, and Take a Test is an app on Windows that locks into that URL and only allows that URL to be shown and the test to be taken during that. I'm going to skip that one because I don't have one. We're also working to cultivate some specific app categories from the Windows Store. So apps that are downloadable and ready to use will show up in this location. These are offline provisionable apps that will be installed as part of the provisioning package. And then finally, there's just a little bit of customization. People told us they didn't like us when we put only a single image on there. So if you have a default image you want for the lock screen for your schools, you would simply upload it here, and then you would be done and ready to go. So that workflow then simply puts that provisioning package onto this USB here. Nothing specific or necessary for a speed or anything of the USB package to use. From here, we would simply take our new device and we would plug in the USB. Now on the first part of the out-of-box experience, this is what it typically looks like. You have your language page. It recognizes a provisioning package. So it recognizes when you insert this in there, and it asks you, it has a dialog that says, do you want to install this? And so the answer there is simply, yes, I want to. And then it goes through the process. Now one of the, yes?
So what version of Windows 10 does this need? Like, is it any version?
So this first came out, so the question was what version of Windows does this need? This capability to recognize it first came out with the Setup School PCs in Anniversary Update, which was the previous one that just came out. Now, provisioning packages have been able to be applied, and the Windows Image Configuration tool let you create provisioning package for some time. The workflow to recognize it just started in that Anniversary Update. And then coming in the Creators Update, there's an addition on top of that. If you've tried this in Anniversary Update, if you happen to click past this first screen, does anybody know what happened? We had to reset the device or go back because the next screens didn't recognize it. So if you happen to actually accidentally click next or do something like that, the first multiple screens now, if you happen to click through, will recognize the provisioning package and let you apply it now. So we've heard a few things in this process that are interesting, and we're working on those as we move forward. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is that the policies on this device are getting applied. There's some magic that's happening as part of this as well. In previous versions, prior to Creators Update, which is coming out next, you had to do click-throughs. You had to put in your AAD account to do an Azure AD join. And then on the back end of that, you as a user were an admin on that. Or if a student did it, they were an admin. Or whoever's account was put in there was an admin on that device. What we're doing in Creators Update is we're creating what's called bulk AAD enrollment. Now what's happening behind the scenes, I didn't put an ID in there for my Azure account. What's happening behind the scenes is this is reaching out to my AAD tenant, and it's creating or getting what's called more or less a guest token. That guest token is allowing the device to enroll in Azure Active Directory and become AAD joined, which is the end state for manageability we want to get to. It's also then enrolling in doing bulk enrollment in MDM or Intune in this case. So some of those things we did manually in the past are happening behind the scenes. And then it's going to spit out on the backside. The user's going to have the rights they have assigned through AAD to log into that device. So once this goes through this process, spins for a few minutes, and comes back to the lock screen, what we get on that is we get a device on lock screen that any AAD user can log into. And so let me switch and show you what that looks like really quickly on this device over here, which is a device that I've provisioned into Intune, utilizing this process. And so this is still some of the lock screen stuff from Anniversary Update, the previous update to Windows. And so it has a set image on here. This is what you'd be able to modify. But when I simply log into that, I've logged in here. I am logged in as an administrator of this device. I have Craig Ashley as an admin in my AAD tenant. And so when I log into this device, then that's what's going to happen. Now what you'll notice is there are some things that aren't on the taskbar and some things that we've removed as part of that setup school PC process. We've set up a specific set on the start screen here with School Essentials, and we've removed a few other apps which weren't education-specific applications here. So any AAD user can log into this device now that's part of my tenant. I happen to, on this one, just to show you here my account, behind the scenes, I am an admin, administrator on this account. We'll show a little bit down the road a student logging into the device, and then we'll show that the student is not administrator on there because they're not marked as that on the AAD tenant. Yes? So the question was, will it prompt to connect to a separate Wi-Fi profile if it can't reach it as part of the provisioning package to do that process? I don't know the answer to that one. I'd have to check on that and see. Well, we did add it manually, but I think the question was if it can't connect to the one that you've added manually, will it prompt you to put those in those? I guess we're talking as part of this Ubi workflow. Right. That's what we're saying. If we've put that in there as part of that, I think the question was, as we're applying the provisioning package, it's trying to reach out to AAD and to MDM, and what happens if it can't connect to that Wi-Fi at that point. All right, so let's switch gears. Now we have these devices that are set up, and the process flow would simply be to walk through this number of devices. So if you have 20 devices, you would simply walk through. You can create multiple USBs and do it that way as well. But again, the end result is we have this managed device that we are ready to go on here. And so then the next step would be any additional customizations that we want to have as part of that. I mentioned the Windows Store for Business. And so the Windows Store for Business does a few things here. It creates an ability to purchase free or paid apps from what is the Windows Store. All of the apps that are in the Windows Store client that are on a machine, we can see through the Windows Store for Business. So there's volume acquisition. There's a variety of other things that result from this. Now, when I show it to you, what you'll see is that you'll get an education-focused flair, even though it's still called the Windows Store for Business. But there's a whole bunch of different things that are in there that can be purchased and applied onto those devices. So we'll switch and show you what that experience looks like. so this is one of my Windows Store for Business tenants for education. Now what you'll notice first off is it does say Windows Store for Business, but it is surfacing up educational content. So the cylinder that comes across here has specific education apps. Here it's Minecraft that it's showing. But as I scroll down, you'll notice that it's Organize Your Classroom here. In the standard business one that's not education focused, it is productivity. And then it goes from there. So you can see a variety of these that are in here. Now, if I want to purchase apps, I can simply search for one that I want here. And I'll search for the Arduino app. Arduino is a STEM app here. And when I click on it, it's going to search and find anything that's related to there. I've timed out. We'll log back in again here. And so it searched for a variety of things. This was the one that I was interested in, the Arduino IDE app. And you'll notice it went very quickly there, but I've already purchased this app, so it gives me a manage button, and it'll take me to my inventory to figure out what I want to do with it. It would say buy if I hadn't done that here yet. But if I simply click manage, it's going to show me what I've done with this app previously. There's a variety of things that I can do with an app from the Windows Store for Business here. And it doesn't want to continue to be logged in every time I click. But there's a variety of things that I can do with the Windows Store for Business. And let me try, I'll go to a different tenant here and see if that'll help us here. All sorts of demo issues here today. We'll try one more time on this one to see if it's going to keep us logged in. Nope. All right, we're back here. So let me skip the interim step and go to the inventory here. So this will show, crossing fingers, it'll show the things that we can do with apps here. Once I purchase it from that previous stage, it puts it into my inventory, which is this location. There's a variety of actions that I can take on it from here. One is that I can put it in the private store. The private store is a tab in the Windows Store client that all of these apps go into. So if my preferred method of getting the app to the user is to put it in the store, the user can go to the private store tab, click on it, and install the app. There's an interesting hybrid scenario here. All the rest of the tabs that are normally there can show up and the private store, or there's also policies to block the rest of the tabs and only show that private store if you want to. Now the nice thing with Intune for Education is that once I've put that into my inventory, it automatically syncs it over to Intune, which is the simplest way to push the apps. We can put it in a private store and create it, but we can also then simply push those apps from Intune to the users or their devices here. And you can see if I simply go over to the right here, on any of these applications that are in my store, I can do a variety of things. See who it's licensed to, I can remove it, assign to people, and do a variety of other things that are part of this workflow as well. Last thing here, just to show this private store piece. Through the settings and private store, this is where we set up what the private store would look like here. So down here under the display name, I could create what I want that private store to show. So it would be our school name, and then when the students or teachers went in there, it's the tab up on the right that the user would simply log into. And so on this machine, we'll show the private store capabilities here. And so I'm going to log this user out, which was myself as the admin, and then I'm just going to log back in as a student. And again, we talked about that first-time login being in that 20 to 30-second range. Second-time logins, as you've seen, are really fast on these existing devices. So I've logged into this one with this user before here. And when I pull up the Windows Store for this user here, you'll notice that I have a private store tab over here. And so that's the private tab that I've named it Craig Demo for this tenant that I'm showing on. And these are the apps that are in there in the private store. And Cheryl can access those and install those on her specific machine if we wanted that workflow to work. We wanted her to have a specific number of apps that she can choose from for this device.
You mentioned getting rid of the other tabs. Is that only through the Intune?
No, it's a
group policy?
group policy related. So that's not currently an Intune button. There's a goal to do a couple of these additional things in Intune for Education as well.
And is that in Anniversary or is that in Creator?
That's been there for a while, yeah. So those policies were previous policies, yeah.
If you want to push these apps out to users that haven't logged onto the devices yet,
Yeah.
do you think that can happen, or does it need to happen when they...
Yeah, so for this one, it will be at logon time when they've logged into those.
What if they have that device, but they're one of several users? Would it still wait until they log in that time?
It would, yes.
So like a primary
Yep.
device?
Yeah. Yep. All right. So at this point then, we've done a variety of things in about 47 minutes so far. We've set up Office. We've set up Intune for Education. The one thing we haven't spent time on, and you don't have to in this process flow for the most part, is Azure. So in the old workflow, you would probably have to go into the Azure AD portal and you'd have to do some group assignments, some setups, some different policy settings in there. You have access to that piece as part of Intune for Education, so you'll get access to the Azure portal and you can manage specific things in there as well. But there are a couple things that are automatically turned on as part of this, as the AAD piece. One of those is enterprise state roaming. If you're familiar with that, that's how the users can log into a bunch of different machines and their preferences and settings follow them. And then the other piece is that bulk enrollment piece, which is that bulk AAD enrollment. Typically, you would have to go in and enable all that first in Azure before it would work. Intune automatically has those turned on as part of the tenant that is associated with the Intune piece. So we've set those up. We've handed the devices out. Now, one of the things that came in the anniversary update is Take a Test. Take a Test, as we mentioned just briefly earlier, it's an inbox app. It's on Pro devices and above. And what it does is it does specifically what it says up here. It locks that machine down to a specific URL. So we're having some interesting chats this morning and yesterday about how standardized tests are currently delivered here in Australia. In the US, it's interesting. I was a teacher for 5 years and in the early 2000s in New Jersey public schools. And we still did standardized tests. We did state tests at that time. And what would happen is my principal would come by and she'd hand me 25 tests, booklets of tests, and she'd count them out. And I'd watch her count them out. And then I would count them out, and she'd watch me count them out. And I'd sign my life away that I had 25 of these high-stakes tests. And then at the end of the day, the same thing happened in reverse. I counted them out, she counted them out. And then we both signed that I turned in exactly the number that she gave me. If something had happened, if one of those tests had gone away in the United States from a testing perspective, it is a possibility for losing your job as a certified teacher because that packet could be out and people could be looking at it. If you translate that into this world of online tests, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen on a machine to lock it down to provide that same mode. And that's what Take a Test is doing. The URL that you put in to take a test gets locked just into that. There's no print screen. In fact, I don't demo it because I can't show it on the screen because you can't do screen captures and those types of things with it. So we just kind of show the screenshot up here. Now, the thing that we're doing with Intune for Education is we're making it much, much simpler to deploy that. And actually, these are just some of the things that I was mentioning. Intune has a way to set up a profile on every device and push it out there so that every device shows up with Take a Test on it. And so these are the things that behind the scenes, students cannot do as a result of this. Now, the interesting thing that we heard was that it's not just the high stakes assessment. There's a lot of formative assessments or just testing URLs that we point kids to on an ongoing basis. And I'll spend time tomorrow, not today, but teachers can create test taking or take a test URLs, put that in a class notebook, and send those out separately to students, not part of this workflow. So there's some interesting use cases that popped up as part of this. It was a little more convoluted if you're using full Intune to deploy this, or a little bit more in System Center with policies and things that are set up there. But Intune for Education makes it pretty simple here to do that. And so as we switch back here, if I pull this out, it's simply one of the items on the left here, which is take a test profiles. And I would simply create a test profile here. And I would add a user or an account, create an account for it, and name it. I'd simply name it take a test. And then I would just put the URL in there. Now, the interesting thing for this, at least I know the way that it's happening in some of the US schools, is that schools don't have one-to-one devices for everybody. So 1 week, second grade takes the test. The next week, third grade takes the test. And fourth grade takes the test, or year 5, year 6, year 7, and so on. And so the easy way to do this with Intune is that you may have to do a different URL for each of those. And so the only change that we have to make on an ongoing basis is the URL that goes in there, and then we can push that out to those profiles, and it's a simple change to get that up and running. Yes? Yeah, so behind the scenes, so the question was, are they running Edge? So behind the scenes, it is more or less running the Edge engine behind the scenes. So it locks into that, and it pops up fully on the screen to that URL. It does, yep. Some of them, yeah. So there's some things that have to work with it. Definitely interested to hear if you have specific testing vendors that you work with that don't have Edge compatibility. Would like to hear about what those are. One of those things that our Take a Test team does on an ongoing basis is they work with a lot of the testing vendors, but they haven't hit everybody at this point. But they do a couple things. They'll work with them to make sure that whatever portions of the Edge engine need to be compatible are compatible with that. And then the next step is what they want to do is they want to work through and see if there are any additional certification requirements. What we found from anniversary update to this release coming out, and this was driven specifically out of UK accessibility requirements, that there are some profiles or some changes that we need to make to meet what we would call an individualized education plan. So some students in the UK have to have their test printed out, and we have to allow that. And so testing vendors are driving additional requirements into us as well. And then on the outside of that, what we obviously want the testing vendors to say, certified with Take a Test in Windows 10. But again, and then once we push this, it simply gets pushed out to all of the devices here. And I have just a couple screenshots that show this in a semi non-elegant fashion here. But again, what the idea is, they simply, for Take a Test, the student would simply see a test account that they would click on. They don't have to log into it because they're going to log into the test that they see or that they're given from that testing provider. I have kind of a dummy Take a Test that I've created here. Microsoft Forms, if you're familiar with that, allows us to create a test or a quiz. We can lock into a Microsoft form as well. So if a teacher had an assessment that they wanted to give, they could create this form, simply send it out to the students, and they would lock into it. So it locks into those types of things as well here. And it's a little hard to see, but all of this is documented up on TechNet. I mentioned that there's some information. It's this ms.edu.secure assessments, and then this enforced lockdown to create that link, and then it simply gets embedded. When the student clicks on that link, they open into this Take a Test. For Creators Update, we're going to have an online way to create that URL without having to go through a manual process or knowing I have to put this little piece in front of this piece, and then it provides the link out there. It'll be up on the Microsoft.com education page as a way to do that. So I'm going to spend just a last couple of minutes here talking about the devices that are part of this as well, because certainly one of the goals here was to be able to get good new devices up and running here. And so certainly touch and pen and a lot of those things are important to us to have those devices up and going. And you can see some of these announcements on board, and we'll continue to work with OEMs to share out more information on these. But this is a broad brush of some of the devices that have been announced over the past several weeks that are coming out. These are in US dollars at this point. I don't know what the exact exchange rate would be on those. You could do the general math at this point. The one that I was showing up here and I can hold afterwards is this guy, which is this Acer TravelMate Spin B1. I've been using it for about the past 3 to 4 weeks. It's kind of my day job at Microsoft, and it does pretty much everything that I want it to do. I can have 6, 7, 8 edge tabs, a bunch of other stuff open. So I've been pretty impressed with the speed and the functionality on that as a 432 or a 464 device as well. And you can see some of the other ones. These are the interesting ones. These are what's called Intel reference designs, codenamed Diamond Creek there. I don't have any of those, but what Intel typically does is work with local OEMs providing that reference design, and then the local OEMs build some of those. If you're interested in kind of what it looks like, this 2-in-1 is similar to one of the devices, the green and white one that's down in the Windows booth in terms of fit and finish, but it's got a little bit of the darker colors there. Now, just wrapping up the end of this is the Office 365 piece. And most of you have used this, but again, the goal here is in this amount of time, we're right at an hour here. We've done the majority of the things that we need to do to get this in the hands of teachers and let them start teaching and working on things. So Office 365 Education, the online version of that we've set up. That's ready to go. Each of those users, when they log into those devices, will be able to sign in to Office 365 Education and use those capabilities, which are the things that are on here as well. Microsoft Classroom has been assigned as part of that school data sync process, and so teachers can start utilizing that functionality with their students as well. The groupings the users have flowed through from that process, so that this is something that they can immediately, again, start taking advantage of as well. I'm sorry? Yeah, right now. So Classroom is in preview, and it's available through it on the preview. Right now it is in US and EU data centers, yes. They're looking to do some expansion there. Is there data sovereignty requirements here? Yes, okay. So again, the preview mode of that as it's coming out as well. And then kind of the last one there is the OneNote class notebook piece. So teachers can utilize that process with the groups, the pieces that are set up and synced from SDS into the class notebook functionality that's there and ready to go as well. So I'm going to skip just to the end here. Really quick run through here. We set up Office, we set up Intune, we imported data from School Data Sync. We did this in about an hour with chatting and discussing. The one place where it takes time and why I don't show that live is the syncing of that data. That School Data Sync, those Excel files, or pulling directly from your SIS system does take time. So that's one of those in the background that's taking time to sync all of that information up there. So if we didn't have some of those lead times in between with data coming in, an hour's reasonable to do a bunch of these things. We talked about Windows Store for Business, how you get those apps, and that those sync into Intune for Education as well. We showed that new Setup School PC functionality that's coming to get the devices up and running really quickly. And then we finally talked about getting that Take a Test set up in a broader fashion. And I showed a little bit in between there, what does the student device and then the admin experience look like on here. So things to think about if you want to start looking at some of this. If you don't, you all looked like you had Office 365 and familiar with that. You can sign up for free and test that capability. Intune for Education isn't ready yet. When we pushed the blog post a couple weeks ago, there's a link in there to sign up for more information. That link will do a couple things. It'll obviously get you more information down the road, and it'll put you on a link for some preview capabilities when they're available for Intune for Education as well. Now, the last thing on that one is we didn't talk that much about how you would get Intune, so I wanted to spend just a second saying that. Intune for Education will be available on a per-device purchase. So if you want to purchase 20 devices, you can purchase a per device license of Intune for Education as well. And all the things we showed on here with Intune for Education come with that. The bulk enrollment, the enterprise state roaming capabilities, all those things work with that. If you have a volume licensing agreement with rights to Intune, Big Intune, you're going to get rights to Intune for Education as well. So you don't have to be a volume license customer or have those licensing pieces to get this. There's a method to get it separately on a per device basis as well. So last thing, these are a few slides that were added in. Other places to get information on here as well. Tonight, I know there's some fun stuff that's happening with the Spark after dark here. And I wanted to just briefly, I'm happy to take a couple more questions, but Dominic, he wanted to introduce himself just briefly here as well, since he's from the local area. So I don't know if they can hear your voice here.
I'll use my big voice. So I want to say a big thank you to Craig for taking the time to fly out from the US. But if you are a person looking for someone as part of the local team in Australia from the Microsoft Education team, that's me. I'm the account manager for all of the Catholic and independent schools here in Queensland, based in the Brisbane office. But I can also connect you more broadly with our national team if you've flown in to Queensland as part of Ignite this week. So if you've kind of been wanting to put a face and a name to someone as part of the local Microsoft Education team, that's me, and pass it back to you.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm happy to answer more questions now, happy to answer afterwards. I know there are some questions on Take a Test, what's supported. You can find me, just send me a DM or a tweet on Twitter if you have additional questions as well. I'm happy to follow up. That may be an easy way to do it if you have specific questions that you haven't thought about now or you have a follow-up outside of that. So happy to answer questions, stand around and answer them. I have this one Acer device if you want to see that as well. If not, we have one.